Hello and welcome to Transplant's Take on Sport. My name's Lewis Daniels and today's guest is liver transplant recipient Emma Wiltshire, the world's fastest female transplant sprinter and then some, so make sure you stick around to find out more. Emma tells me about her unbelievable achievements in athletics both before and after her life-saving liver transplant, winning multiple medals throughout the time she's been competing. The story behind Emma's liver transplant is a traumatic one that has seen her overcome so many obstacles, showing great determination to return to the track. Over the course of the next hour and a bit, you'll hear about this in more detail, and I hope you take something from it just like I have. If you're enjoying the podcast, please make sure you press subscribe or follow wherever you normally listen so you don't miss an episode. And if you'd like to follow the podcast on social media, all the links will be in the show notes. Emma Wiltshire, welcome to Transplant's Take on Sport.
Thanks for having me.
You're a liver transplant recipient, the second one we've had on the podcast, and two back-to-back. And your story is pretty mental, transplant-wise. So,
Pretty much.
Listeners, please do stick around. There's a lot to go through on this. You're also a sprinter, and a very talented sprinter at that, both before and after transplant. Is there anything specific that you're training for at the moment for when a competition might be back now? And anything to go for? Anything in the pipeline?
Yeah, so I mean, it's been really tricky the last kind of 18 months with COVID and with training, with everything. So there's not been much training going on. But I've kind of got my eyes set on, it would have been a World Transplant Games year this year. Unfortunately, that was cancelled. So looking ahead for 2 years now in Perth, Australia, is kind of the next big aim. But I'm also back. I call it kind of semi-competing. I had a competition actually on Wednesday night, so 2 days ago, which was very, very low-key. It was kind of a vets league for my club and just kind of turn up and see where I'm at, which, okay, but not great. But yeah, and then it would be nice to get another indoor season. So I haven't done a sort of full indoor athletics season for a while, and it's kind of what I prefer most. It's 60 meters, so it's nice and short indoors. Don't have to worry about the wind or the rain or the cold. So that would be kind of December of this year, but going into January, February of next year.
Plenty to look forward to then.
Yeah.
I've been reading your story that you sent me before doing this, and you said that you gave yourself a break from athletics after the 2019 World Transplant Games.
Yeah.
And then lockdown hit. And being so sporty like you are, how did you find lockdown? How did you cope? How did you stay active?
So as you mentioned, I was aiming for the World Transplant Games in 2019, and I kind of achieved a lot of the goals that I wanted to. I had a really, really busy year at work. I changed jobs and I was traveling all over the world. And it was something that I was really enjoying. But after the Transplant Games in 2019, I was just like, I've done everything I wanted to achieve. I'm absolutely exhausted. I need a break. And I thought that might last a month. It ended up lasting 6 months. I didn't go to the gym. I didn't step onto a track. I didn't run. I mean, some people might call it burnout. I think for me, it was just an extended period of rest that I needed. And then lockdown hit, and, transplantees were basically told, don't leave your house, shield. And I was like, right, well, I'm not walking anywhere. I'm not running anywhere. I'm not doing anything. Let's get the home videos, kind of fitness videos, YouTube, all on. And actually, I was like, do you know what? It's good. It's good to be active again. It's good to be doing something again, even if it is just in my lounge. That's where I was kind of realised that I've missed this and I need it in my life, and it is part of my life. So as soon as we were able to sort of be released back into the wild, I kind of started doing a bit of running. It wasn't on a track. Tracks weren't open then, but kind of on roads, on a bit of hills, bit of fields near us, and I was like, this is who I am. This is what I do. This is what I've done for over half my life. And it was just nice to have a bit of normality in what was complete chaos, basically. So,
what sort of activities with the videos were you doing at home?
I don't know if I can do a bit of a plug, but I was doing sort of the Les Mills workouts, which were completely mad. I don't know if anyone's been following them, but it's the sort of body pump stuff and grit, where you're just kind of going for about 20 minutes, half an hour, which is all my concentration span really can last when it comes to sport. I'm an out and out sprinter, so even that was a bit tough. But they're really pushing you hard, and then you're absolutely floored for sort of the rest of the day. But it gives you a bit of a kind of a buzz of you've worked hard, and you know that you're really sort of keeping fit. So and building strength and getting strong again, which has always kind of been important to me.
I read that you'd done a bit of yoga through lockdown. Had you ever done it before?
Yeah, I'd sort of dabbled. I think it's, I've got a bit of a chaotic kind of work life in that, yeah, as I mentioned, I sort of travel a lot with the world and work in sport, high performance sport. So that can be pretty stressful at times. So yoga kind of keeps me a bit zen. So yeah, I was doing a lot of that kind of almost daily, just trying to sort of wake up and do it. And sometimes you just feel like, I don't want to do this. I just want to sit around and lie around and do nothing. But actually for me, it's really beneficial in that even if it is just 20 minutes, half an hour, 40 minutes, I find it really beneficial. And it's something that like my mum has always done. She's in her 70s now and she still goes to like a weekly yoga class. So it's kind of those things that, it's available to all and can be tailored to any kind of level. So I like that.
Do you think you're in a better position now to compete, having had that period of rest and taken on some different activities at home through lockdown?
Yeah, I think perhaps not physically, but mentally. I just needed it. I just had no drive. I had no ambition to do any sort of running at all. And that's kind of the thought of going on a track was just leaving me like, oh, that would just be a chore. And that would be, I just had no want to do it. So if I hadn't had that, I feel like I maybe would have just carried on slogging it out, doing as normal until the lockdown hit. And then maybe I would have thought during lockdown, I don't want to do anything, rather than the complete opposite. I'd had that break beforehand. And by the time lockdown and someone tells you can't do it, it's almost the exact like, oh God, okay, when can I do it? And when can I get back on the track? So it was beneficial, definitely from a psychological point.
I think a lot of people have had that time to rethink, reevaluate, and focus more on themselves with being at home, especially people like us who've had to stay at home. And at first it was stay at home. You can open a window if you want, but
Yeah.
you can't leave. Otherwise this happens. It's been good to, of me anyway, reevaluate, rethink, work out what I actually want and get moving from there. Now, as we're breaking out again, it's a new start and a new re I don't know, get it back to life again, starting again, new start.
Yeah, I think so. And I mean, everything sort of flipped on its head a little bit. I mean, I know that I am not going to return to, athletics pre-transplant I was training a lot. It took a lot of my time up. But, now that I've kind of, as you said, it's kind of a pause and reevaluating what's important to you. So I've got the headspace to go now. It doesn't matter if I can't train every day for hours. What is important to me is that I found a sort of space that's comfortable and it makes me happy, that I can go to the track, I can do an hour and a half. There's a little group that I've just sort of started doing a few sessions with, and that's all I kind of need right now, and that keeps me ticking over, and that's what makes me happy, and that's something that I can do for me, even if his work is busy and stressful. Then I can go, no, I'm stopping this for now, and I'm going to go to the track and do something, and that's important to me, and it's definitely not exclusive to transplantees. I think that's lots of people can do something like that.
Absolutely. You mentioned your athletics pre-transplant there. We'll come on to that now. And for people who don't know, you are a very, very good sprinter. When did you first take up athletics?
So I was 14 when I actually joined a club. Before that, I'd kind of done a bit of running and a bit of jumping at school. So county championships, for anyone that's kind of familiar with that. I think I'd won county championships before I'd even sort of joined a club, and I had this terrible technique. And just my school teacher said, right, you've got to get yourself down to a club because we can't do anything with you anymore. It's like, oh, okay, that's a little bit scary. So I joined at 14, which is a little bit late for athletics. People usually join clubs probably, I don't know, when they're 10 or 11 or something, and just do kind of run, jump, throw, lots of different multi-events. But I was 14 and I knew that I definitely wanted to run. I wanted to go as fast as I could. I couldn't go very far because I ran out of steam, but I just knew that's what I wanted to do. So yeah, I went down to my club, which was Northampton Phoenix at the time, in Northampton. It was about 20 minutes away, and yeah, sort of all started there.
This might sound like a really basic question that people might have asked you at the level you've been at. People might ask you a lot. Did you win all your events on sports day at school by some distance?
Yeah. So the first memory I have of running was in primary school. I'm not actually sure if it's a memory or that I've seen a photo and it kind of jogged a bit of a memory, but we had these sticks with stars on. So if you were first, second or third, you got a stick with a star on. If you were first, you got the biggest stick with a star on. And if you were third, you got like the smallest. And I remember coming third in that. And that was kind of, I think, the last time that I didn't win something at school, because I was like, no, never again. So at secondary school, yeah, it was kind of winning by a fair amount, and it was sort of known as like, I remember some of the kids used to call me Popeye because I had like muscles in my legs, where other girls my age didn't, and they didn't like it probably because I used to beat the boys as well. But so yeah, that's when I kind of noticed it from like age 12, 13, and at that point it was when I joined a club and sort of progressed even further from there.
So obviously being good from a young age, and you went on to compete in the British Championship finals, and you were part of England and GB under-23s. Was there a point where you were scouted and picked up by GB or a higher level club than your local club when you were younger?
Yeah, so in athletics, it's probably kind of different to other sort of team sports in that you don't necessarily get scouted. You can enter yourself in competitions, and it's all done kind of on selection basis. So, and it's also a unique thing about athletics is that you could be training as a pretty recreational athlete and be training in the same group as an Olympian. You're doing the same sessions as them. You're doing the same training. You're just not quite as talented, but you can do the same sort of work. And then as an athlete, you'll go to sort of national championships, and you'll get selected from there. So for me, I think it was doing like an indoor championships, and they're based on time, and they were doing, we're going to send a team away to Norway, and that's how I got selected for for being for England. And then again with the under-23s, it was all sort of done on times from previous seasons, and that season I was kind of top ranked in the top I think 3 or 4 in the country for under-23 based on the times that I'd done pre-selection. So yeah, got to go and get relay teams for under-23s for Great Britain when they're competing against other countries.
And you mentioned that you can be a recreational athlete training with Olympic standard.
Mm-hmm.
What did your training involve when you were with those teams?
Well, so I guess it changed pretty much when I went to university. So when I was sort of 16, 17, training was maybe, we had like 2 running sessions a week, 2 weight sessions a week. And then when you're at university, it gets a little bit more serious, and as I said, you're surrounded by elite athletes everywhere, and there's nothing really stopping you from doing exactly the same sort of sessions. So I think the most I was ever training, probably most of my 20s, so from about 20 to 25, 26, maybe even to 28, I was doing probably about 3 or 4 running sessions a week, and then another 3 gym sessions a week on top of that. And then during the summer, you're racing most weekends as well, so you're traveling kind of all over the country, or in my case, sometimes over to Europe to compete. And again, you don't necessarily have to be part of the British team to do that. You can compete for your club or for your university. But yeah, that's sort of how it works.
What sort of times were you running back then when it was the British Championship finals, that sort of level?
So for 60 meters, I was running 7.5 seconds was my best time, and then 100 meters was 11.7 was my 100 meter PB.
Impressive. Was there a plan to ever go Olympic level? That sort of, I know you're at a very high level anyway, the British Championships, but was there the plan or a chance to go higher?
Yeah, I think when I look back on it, I've always been quite a realistic athlete. So probably when I was younger, it would have been kind of Olympics would be my main aim. But actually, when I got to kind of, late teens, early 20s, and it probably doesn't sound very much, but I was probably about 3 or 4 tenths off making that Olympic team, which is a split second, less a second, but in running it's quite a lot. And I was pretty just happy with the level that I was at. I had ambitions to win regional championships, which I did. I had ambitions to medal at national championships, age group championships, which I did. And I had an injury, a small injury, possibly at a stage where I could have progressed to the next level, but I was also, looking at these athletes, and it's a really big commitment to put everything into it and to go to that next level. And you have to be super talented. And I was always quite kind of, knowledge about the fact that I'm not, a super talented. And I was pleased with the level that I was at. I was a good national standard, and that was kind of my nice niche that I was able to find good level competition. I was able to win good level competition, but never make it onto that Olympic team.
You've always got the memories of that as well, being at such a high level where you were. And you've mentioned in that bit we were chatting about there, you were training, you said up to about 28. Not long after that comes the transplant story, which we'll move on to now. Again, reading your story, you were in Portugal with the Wales Commonwealth Games team. You said you were involved with high performance sport.
Mm-hmm.
Did you have any idea that there might be something wrong at that point?
No, so I'd moved down to Wales from Loughborough, which was my base at university, and I was living there at the time. I'd moved down to Wales, and I'd got I had some colleagues down there that I'd worked with before, so I was involved with the Welsh Athletic setup. I was actually doing sort of soft tissue massage with them, and probably around the May and June of 2014. I had been diagnosed with colitis, with ulcerative colitis, which is a pretty nasty illness to have, and it makes you feel pretty rubbish. Symptoms are fatigue, anemia. You don't feel great. So I wasn't feeling 100%, and I knew that I wasn't feeling 100%. But yeah, so we flew to Portugal, and there was actually 2 days before flying to Portugal, I'd been quite physically sick. And, I was listening to Andrew's podcast, and he said the same. He'd been quite physically ill. But even the next day, typical athlete, woke myself up, took some Red Bull, drank some Red Bull, and raced that next day. And then the day after, we flew to Portugal. And I think 2 days after that, I'd collapsed and was in a coma.
It's quite quick.
Yeah, it's pretty quick. We arrived in Portugal on a Wednesday. I was treating all day Thursday, so I was doing massage all day Thursday. And that day, I was feeling really rough, and I'd actually I was getting sort of hot sweats and a headache. I'd actually gone, we were like a sports resort near the sea, so I'd gone to sort of stand in the sea to try and cool off and try and get a bit of this nausea. And then that night we were supposed to go out for one of the team managers' birthdays. So I was like, let's just go down to the bar and have one drink. And I thought, I can't do this. I feel so ill. I've got such a bad headache. So again, typically, pop a few painkillers, went to bed, woke up the next day and thought, oh my God, something is seriously, seriously wrong.
You can obviously remember quite a lot of it. For some people, that might be a complete blur from feeling sick to collapse, coma. I'm new to learning about liver transplant, liver failure through being a kidney myself. The coma, is that common for liver failure?
So I think my case was quite unusual from the fact that, as I said, I was racing on a Tuesday, doing some sort of sport, and then I don't know whether it was just sort of like brush it off and I can keep going, and actually I was more ill than I thought it was, but the way that it kind of went so dramatically, I haven't heard of many others that are that sort of quick. I've heard that they were ill and then they went to hospital and then they knew they were having a transplant. Whereas with mine, it was, I was in a hotel, collapsed in the lobby of the reception, and remember coming round, and then just the pain in my abdomen was so severe. I remember saying to the team manager, I'm dying. I'm going to die. And he said, not on my watch. You're not going to. Basically, got me to the hospital, and I just thought, how can I make them believe me that I'm in so much pain? So I just threw myself on the floor and thought, right, just someone can just help me. And the next thing I know, I was on a sort of a bed. They were trying to sort of stick wires on me and tubes in, and then that's pretty much all I remember. For about a week, I think I was in a coma for. And then, as I came round, crazy morphine dreams for about another sort of few days. Didn't really know whether I was conscious or unconscious, but very aware that I'd had a liver transplant. So it must have been that while I was coming round and while I was in the coma, the nurses, who were extraordinary, it must have kept on telling me, you've had a liver transplant, you're okay. And at no time did I not think I was okay, because, I mean, morphine, never again do I ever want to experience the crazy kind of morphine dreams that I had and the hallucinations. But at no time was I worried or was I scared. I remember asking the nurse at one point, is it going to happen again? Is my liver going to fail again? And she said, no, we've got you now. We've looked after you. We've saved your life.
It's a scary time, but a fascinating story with the speed of it all.
Mm-hmm.
I think people will be interested, on a side note from that, the morphine dreams, what did they include? And were you on a really high dose?
Oh, well, I can only assume. So after the coma, they basically didn't know what was wrong with me. So while I was down in the Algarve, they'd done surgery to just basically open me up to see what was going on. And at that point, they saw that I had an incredibly enlarged liver. And they kept me in, they phoned my family. They said, you have to get over here. She's going to die, basically. That was how serious it was. And they got me up to Lisbon, did the transplant, few complications along the way there. But then when I was coming round from it, the morphine dreams I had, so the biggest one was that I thought my husband, who, we'd been married less than a year at this point, was having an affair with one of the nurses. And it sounds pretty ridiculous, but I was so certain in my head. So when they'd let my husband in to see me, I wasn't really sort of conscious of what was going on. I was apparently, and couldn't move at this point, I'd been in a coma for a week, lost all my muscle, lost about 10 kilos of muscle, just tried to hit him, apparently, because I was just so determined that he was having this affair. And then at night I was dreaming that I was on a boat, which I now put down to the fact that my kidneys are packed in. So my liver had failed completely and my kidneys had failed. And so I was on dialysis as well. So the noise of the water going through the dialysis must have been my subconscious, because,
right,
again, with the doctors, I was asking them what boat we were on when I came round, because I was telling them, they said, no, we're not on a boat, we're in a hospital. I was like, well, yeah, I know, but it's an amphibious hospital, obviously. So it was just, crazy time that I would never want to repeat, but so vivid. I mean, this is coming up to 7 years ago, and I can remember those dreams as if they were like yesterday. And I could write a whole book about those dreams, which is, just insane.
It's so interesting, all this stuff going on. I was saying to Andrew on the last podcast, I think his time from finding out something was wrong to transplant was, I think it was 12 days. And then I thought, that's quick. That's really quick. And then I read your story. 2.
Yeah, typically competitive.
Next level.
Yeah, and I mean, people kind of ask me like, oh, was it tough for you? Was it difficult for you? And my main answer is, I was sleeping. I didn't know any of this was happening. What I feel for is, my mum, who lost my dad when I was quite young. So it was sort of a bit of a history repeating itself for her, thinking that she was going to lose her daughter. It was my husband, again, having to have that phone call saying, your wife is dying, you need to get to Portugal, and then they gave me about 5% chance of survival. Similar to Andrew, I went onto the top of the emergency national list for Portugal. So I sort of hear snippets of it, that I think there was 3 of us on the very top of that list. And the organs came in, and it was, I was the youngest, I was the most likely to survive. So I got that liver, which, again, I don't know anything about it. In In Portugal, it's an opt-out system. Like we're sort of rolling into the UK in various parts. So thank God that liver was available for me. Otherwise, there is no two ways about it. I would not be here. So there's and I try and drum that into as many people that I can. That organ donation is so important. It matters so much, and there's so many people here that I know now that just wouldn't be alive because if organ donation didn't exist, and that just blows my mind.
Absolutely. I'm sure a lot of people listening to this will have been personally affected by organ donation, whether they've had a transplant, someone in the family's had a transplant. And I'm hoping there's people listening who haven't been through it, don't know anyone who's been through it. And if that is you, please have the chat with your family, have a look online at all the different resources out there, have the chat, make sure that the people around you know what you'd like to happen to your organs if the worst does happen. Because your donor, I don't know if you've met the family or not, but they would have saved more lives than just yours.
Yeah, so in Portugal it is all anonymous. It's one of their things that I think that they tries to help them with the process. So I didn't really know. I've never been able to reach out to the family. I've never met any of them. There's no way of me ever getting in touch with them. And I don't know whether that's it was obviously the first thing when I was conscious and knowing what was happening. All I wanted to say was thank you, and it was this family have made a decision at the worst possible time of their life. Hopefully with the consent of their son. It was a man whose liver I received. But yeah, I think it was it was a young man. I think he was in his early 20s and went on to save 9 lives. I think from that. So 9 people being alive just because of organ donation. And as you've said, so many other people have similar stories. Just please have that conversation and have chats with your family. And it doesn't have to be morbid. You don't have to talk about death. We just go, heard this story. I've heard that really good stuff can happen out of organ donation, and you go, yeah, sounds good, and that's it. That's about it, But it's so important.
Of course, and if you do decide to donate, which we really hope you do, your legacy can live on afterwards, and other people would be so thankful for the decision you made, the gift that you've given them, that they could thrive going forward in their life like we've done. Let's come on to what happened after your transplant, because if the story wasn't mad enough, it continues after that. There was quite a few complications afterwards. What exactly happened? You've already mentioned the kidney failure, and there was more life-saving surgery, wasn't there?
Yeah, so again, I'm quite blasé about it all. I think because I've talked about it quite a lot, I have never struggled with talking about it at all. I have never struggled with any sort of mental health issues at all, which I can only put down to the fact that I just kind of talk about it quite a lot, and it seems quite normal to me to talk about.
It's
But
so
yeah,
useful as well to talk about it, I found.
yeah, massively. And because I was in Portugal at the time, probably, and then came back, I was having to tell lots of people because they weren't there to sort of know what was going on. But yeah, so after my transplant surgery, I was still in the coma. But the next day, my family were told I'd had a massive bleed in my chest. I think they nicked an artery during the surgery, and that they were my blood pressure had massively dropped, and they had to rush me back into surgery to fix that bleed, the hemothorax, put a chest drain in, and then wheel me back, still in the coma, still really not sure what was going on. And then when I came round and I sort of was a bit more, knew what was going on, I had a lung collapsed, which again, I've spoken to people and they've said it is actually quite common. But at the time I was in pain everywhere. I couldn't move, but they were trying to feed me and trying to, it was really important that I ate at that point. And I was just saying, I'm in a load of pain and I'm not just moaning for the sake of it. So they took me to get a scan, and saw that my lung had collapsed and was actually pushing on my insides so that it was uncomfortable to eat. So they got another chest drain in, and that stayed in until they flew me back to Birmingham. So I was in Portugal in intensive care for a month, in the ward for a week, the recovery ward for a week, and then they flew me back to Birmingham after 5 weeks. And And I'd say that was the last week was the toughest, because all they were waiting for was a bed to become available in basically any hospital. They were looking at the various liver centres that they could fly me back to. Birmingham was the closest. I was living down in Cardiff at the time, but Cardiff doesn't have a liver centre. So Birmingham was useful for me, mainly because I had family there. It was close to my mum who lives in the Midlands. And yeah, it was every day they were coming saying, no, we can't send you back. We can't send you back. And at that point, I was just, that's the most down I've probably ever been since the transplant, and ever since, because I just wanted to get home. I just wanted normality. They couldn't speak English in that ward. In intensive care, I had some bilingual nurses, which was and doctors, which was just incredible. But in that ward, they just, the food was bad. I didn't need the sort of care that I needed in intensive care. So that was my lowest point. But then they just came and said, we're taking you home. And that was amazing. So yeah, from ambulance, I went in ambulance to the airport, to Lisbon Airport, which was very close to the hospital I was in. Had my own little private air ambulance that they sort of stretchered me onto. Took me back to Birmingham Hospital, Queen Elizabeth, which I was there for about 4 days. And then they were like, right, out you get, off you go. And at that point, I was like, well, I can't walk. I can't do anything. I've been lying on my side for, how do I do anything? They're like, oh, yeah, you'll figure it out. So I did, and I had to. And that was that.
It's a remarkable story, and recovering from that, everything you've had to overcome along the way, which do you think has made you stronger?
Yeah, I think so. But I also think I was mentally strong to begin with, and that helped so much. That helped me fight to stay alive in the very first place. I was, and generally someone that loves life, and that's, down to great friends, great family, my husband. I want to be here, and I knew that, like, probably subconsciously I was a massive fighter. And then as soon after my transplant, I was like, right, I don't want to be in this position where I'm lying and I've lost, a quarter of my body weight, and it's not me. So what can I do to not be in this process? Okay, it's a logical side of me. This is what I need to do. I'm going to go and do it.
And how long, you mentioned some of learning to walk and all those sort of things. How long did it take you to learn to do these everyday tasks again? I know from reading your story, which was very useful for seeing where this podcast would go, breathing, eating, talking, holding a fork, sitting up, walking. How long did that take? And how mentally strong did you have to be to sort of accept, start with, I'm going to have to learn to do this again, and then to physically go and do it?
Yeah, looking back, I don't think I found it mentally tough, because I just saw it as a challenge. So it was almost a bit of a game to me. And you're so poorly when you're coming out of these situations anyway, that you're not really thinking straight anyway. So you're just taking each. It's not even a day at a time; it's an hour at a time, and you're sleeping so much. So when I came around, I couldn't. It sounds bizarre now when I think about it. I couldn't even work out why I couldn't sit up, because I couldn't stretch my neck to see what they'd done to my abdomen. So I couldn't see the pretty, the Frankenstein image that was down there of the staples, the stitches, the tubes, everything. So, that was a bit of a shock when I first saw it. But just to be able to, when I moved from an intensive care to the ward, I had a kind of pulley that I was able to pull myself up from. So it gave me a bit more sort of, I can see what's going on now. And the physiotherapists would be working with me every day to try and get me even just from bed to a chair. I remember that sort of quite early on, from when I was conscious. And that was, it's just, I remember feeling so ill whenever I did it. And then they wanted to get me outside. So getting from the bed to the wheelchair was such, a big deal. And then the big socks go on and you're up walking, and it was just sort of holding on. And I've got pictures of kind of, a nurse on one side and the physio on the other, and just taking little steps. So I'd say by the time that I went from intensive care to the ward, so we're about a month out now from transplant surgery, I could just about get myself from the bed to the bathroom if I needed to go in the middle of the night or something. And I was carrying my, my chest drain, like sort of collector and everything. And, it would take a long time, but I was able to get there. And then when I got back to Birmingham, so yeah, we're about five weeks post transplant. At that point, I could just about start walking down within the ward. But at that point, it was when I'd heard about transplant sport and the transplant games, which I knew were going to be taking place in a year's time. And that's when I thought, right, that's the next big aim.
So there's your main motivation, the World Transplant Games as well. How long did it take you to regain your fitness and start sprinting again before that?
So it was definitely a slow process. I remember one of my friends came to visit me when I was back in Birmingham. One of my best friends, and she was being coached in athletics at the time by a guy called Femi, who was the sort of athletics coach for Transplant Sport, and he'd given her the contact of Lynn Holt, who was the transplant Great Britain transplant team manager. Said, email Lynn, explain your situation, see if there's any chance you're going to be able to go to the World Transplant Games next year, because we've got no idea what sort of state that you're going to be in. So I was like, okay, right. I'm still in hospital at this point. This is like how ridiculously competitive I am and how much sport means to me. But I was emailing her and saying, Lynn, I can't walk yet, but I won the Midland Championships about 2 months ago, and then I had a catastrophic liver failure. But can I be considered for the World Transplant Games in a year's time, even though I know that I'm not going to be able to make the British Games this year, which is usually the trials for? And she replied saying, yeah, keep us updated. Let's see how you go. So yeah, I was, in hospital in Birmingham doing like little body squats and trying to like sort of lift like tins of beans over my head and think, right, okay, how can I get my strength back? Because that's what was so important to me. I'm a, speed power athlete. So I was, squatting big weights and Olympic weights, and I couldn't even hold my iPad at this point to sort of watch TV. So I'd say from leaving there, it all happened at a good pace. I was very conscious, and I know it's something that Andrea mentioned about the stitches and the scarring on your abdomen. So there's a lot of kind of core building and just general kind of circuits and taking things at a very slow pace. But I think the fact that I had that knowledge of working with rehabilitated, if someone's torn a hamstring, you have to gradually go back into it to get back to. This is basically they've sliced me open and put a new organ in, so it's kind of a more extreme version of that, but the same kind of principles, like take everything slowly, only go to what you can do. And yeah, I remember we went on holiday to Australia of December that year, so this was about 5 months post transplant, which I had to have sign off from the surgeon, and which my travel insurance was extortionate, but I was determined to go. And I remember walking up like a sort of a small mountain up there, and there's just a picture of me, like still pretty skinny, but there's a picture of me at the top of that mountain going, yeah, I can do this. And things are taking a bit slower than normal, but I can do this. And then another memory that I have is sort of April of the next year that I was working with Welsh Athletics full time by that point, and we'd gone to a camp in America in Phoenix. And some of the athletes were training, and I was like, oh, can I just, I've been doing a bit of, fast strides. Can I just jump in with you? And I was on the track and I had my spikes with me, and I was like, this is starting to feel sort of normal. And that was kind of March, April time of 2015.
Was it at that point that you knew I'll probably be ready?
Yeah, I had it in my head that World Transplant Games was my aim. I'd looked at the times. I knew that I was sort of like old me would have been capable of running those sort of times. I had half a mind, I'm not specifically training for jumps, but I looked at them and I thought, I'd give them a go as well. Why not? Get a bit of practice in. And yeah, my first race back was in June 2015. And it was we have open competitions in athletics where you just sort of turn up, pay your £5 or whatever it is, and compete against anyone of any age or gender. So you just put down your sort of predicted time. So I put a predicted time down of about 14 and a half seconds, and I was lined up with kind of 10-year-old kids feeling like a little bit silly because I was 30 at this point. And I raced and I crossed the line, and it was a 12.8, and I just burst into tears. it's probably still one of the most emotional moments that I've had. And it was kind of like yeah, I'm back. I've done this. I can do this. This is me. This is my life, and I've done it.
How long after that were you told that you're in for the World Transplant Games?
I can't actually remember. I think we would have had an email sort of. I'm trying to think back now. I think it was probably around December earlier in that year where I'd started to give them sort of kind of estimates of this is what I think I can do. I'm back sort of sprinting now. And they'd incorporated me into some of their transplant training sessions. So they have sort of 4 or 5 training sessions per year at the Warwick University at the Coventry campus there. So I remember going there probably in November of the year that I had my transplant, just to see what was going on and whether I was going to be fit enough and to see what sort of level I needed to be at. And I remember going there and I couldn't do anything yet at that point. I wasn't able to do even sort of running drills or any running, but I just remember being there. And it was the first time that I'd been surrounded by so many people that had a transplant. And I can't implore people enough that have had a transplant to get involved with transplant sport, because it's just such a phenomenal thing that, I mean, if I hadn't have done it, I just think I'd be still sort of in the wilderness trying to figure out what to do with my life and my sport. But, instantly those discussions of like, oh, okay, well, what transplant have you had? And when did you have it? And what medication are you on? And it's a community, it's a family. So yeah, I digress from your question a bit there, but
That's fine.
Wanted to talk about how amazing transplant sport is, and I will continue to digress on any conversation and talk about that.
That's absolutely fine. That's a big moment. I know for me as well, not World Transplant Games, but when I first went to cricket training with the England and Wales transplant cricket team, I didn't take part, wasn't able to take part. I was told I'm not fit enough yet by the doctor, don't go for it just yet. But talking to other people who've been through that, and it's that, I don't know about you, the realisation of, oh, people like me do this.
Yeah. And I've said it before to people that it's so great that your family and friends are always going to be there for you, and if you're lucky enough to have supportive family and friends, but no one really understands what it's like that you have to wake up every day and you have to take your medicine, and you've suddenly been put on recently like a list that says don't go and speak to people because you might get COVID and die, and that's no one understands that apart from like sort of fellow transplantees. And when you don't want to take your medicines, you don't want to go to your checkups, you have to do that just to stay alive, and to be surrounded by people with that, I think is so important. And it's not necessarily a support group, because we're hopefully, fingers crossed, all really well and doing well. But how amazing is it to see other people that are doing well and be like, oh God, this isn't the end of their life. This is just another section of my life.
It's such a special moment to have that family around you, family of other people who've been through the same thing.
Mm-hmm.
And going back to those World Transplant Games in Argentina, what were you aiming for going into it, and did you expect to do as well as you did?
I don't think I was expecting to do so well. I thought I've had it in the back of my mind that if I could replicate the sort of times that I'd done in those little pre-competitions in the 100 and 200, that I'd do pretty well. And other people around me. So one of the team managers, Barry Laverick, who's just fantastic, he'd kind of mentioned to me, Emma, don't you worry, you're going to be fine, you're going to smash it. I was like, but Barry, what if I don't? I don't know. Like, oh no, you're our new sort of ticket to success. I don't think I am, Barry. I don't know. I'd entered the other events, and I'd been sort of doing a bit of training for the long jump and the high jump beforehand. But still, you've got no idea. I had no other. There's no kind of world rankings of transplantees that you can compare yourself against until you actually get to the games. And in the end, I ended up doing pretty well.
I'll big you up because I've seen the results, and please correct me if I'm wrong. But first World Transplant Games, not that long after your transplant.
Yeah, a year post. Yeah.
6 gold medals, 4 world records. That's pretty impressive.
Yeah. No. I was really pleased. I mean, I have to say, I'm not going to big up myself too much. So the high jump, there was only me, so that was an automatic goal. So that was a bit of a gimme, but yeah, no, I was really pleased with the others. And I mean, I think it's only 2 days of competition. You have to sort of crush everything into those. So that was 100, 200, 4x1, 4x4, long jump and high jump was all within the space of 2 days. So it gets to a point where it's not even just a case of how can I do in each one, it's just survival. So it's, how can I get to the point where I'm still okay enough to be doing the next event? But no, it was really special. And my husband was out there, my mum, my husband's mum they were all there as well. And again, it's a little bit, you sort of do it for them as well, because they've been through absolute hell, and I think they need to see that I'm okay. I know that I'm okay, but for them to actually witness it and see how well I'm doing, that was important to me. And it was important to my Lisbon hospital. So after the games, I went back to the Curry Cabral Hospital in Lisbon and sort of gave them one of those medals, because there's no question that without the incredible expertise of the doctors and nurses, then again, I wouldn't be alive either.
Was there a moment there? I mean, the medal might be it. The sort of the top memorable moment or proudest moment, realization, if you like, of wow.
I don't know. I think some of it was a bit of a relief, because there was this kind of pressure going in that that I could do really well. I think I'd had that sort of relief moment probably in that 100 meters, like the month before, when I realized that I can still run and that I can still be competitive. And actually for the 100 meters, there is a video of it, I think, somewhere, of me coming out of the 100, and because there's such a tailwind behind us, basically almost stack it coming out of the blocks, and it was almost all over. So I take a few steps, I almost lose my footing, and then I have to sort of recover from it, look up and think, oh my goodness, I'm not going to win this, and then sort of fight back. So that was a little bit traumatic and a bit of a relief to win that one. Probably my favourite memory from that games though is the 4x1. Because we weren't going into the lead before the baton came to me, and then I just sort of took the baton and we sort of overtook the other team and won the relay. And that was really special to be doing it with other transplantees that you've come to know throughout the sort of training camps, and they're your friends now, and that's really special.
That family feel again.
Yeah, absolutely. And just thinking about it now, and we're missing a World Transplant Games this year, which is just really sad, not just because of the element of competition, but I've got friends now from all over the world, friends from Finland, South Africa, America, Iran, all over the world, where it's an opportunity they get to see each other and catch up, and you can message and see each other sort of over social media and keep in touch that way. But there's nothing like a sort of big celebration of everyone coming together from all around the world and celebrating life. That's essentially what it is, with a little bit of an added competitive element as well.
I've said it before on this, the power of sport, bringing everyone together from different backgrounds to start with, but then you all go through that similar experiences, and then you're all together again.
Yeah, it is incredible. And even on a British sort of level, that my first British transplant games was up in Gateshead, and so that would have been just before the World Transplant Games, I think, that one, in 2015, and it was just looking round, and there's so many people that have had transplants, and all age groups and all abilities, and you see the sort of 3-year-olds and the 4-year-olds that are doing the 25-meter run, and they're running into their arms of their parents, and they've the parents have gone through just the worst possible time, and their kids are okay, all the way to 80-year-olds doing the walk around the track, and that gives you a little bit of like, oh God, hopefully my new organ is going to last that long, because no one tells you how long your organ's going to last, really. And they sort of give like a bit of an estimate, and they said, I think the doctor said to me at one point, oh well, it'll be good if you can last another 30 years or something. And I was like, wow, I'll only be 60 at that point. I'm planning on sort of lasting a bit longer. But at the same time, it's that's why it's so important as well to just do whatever you can and experience life and enjoy life. And for me, that's sport. And I'll hopefully still keep going in, maybe not athletics. I don't know how much longer I've got in me for training and for sprinting, but some form of sport is just super important.
You mentioned it there, the how long the liver lasts, and this is something maybe I should have researched this before. But can you have a second liver or a third liver?
Yeah, I don't really know. I mean, everything seems to be a little bit of a confusion when it comes to my liver. They don't know why it failed. They don't have a definite diagnosis of what it was that caused it. They've mentioned three different things. They've mentioned autoimmune hepatitis. They've mentioned that it could be affected by the colitis or the medication that I had for the colitis. But it keeps on, even on my medical records, I think it keeps on changing. But I don't know, and it's not that I don't want to think about it, but it's just more of the fact that I know that I'm in excellent hands now. I get more blood tests than I could ever ask for or wish for. So if something's going wrong, someone will tell me, and if that's the case, I will have to sort of go into it a bit of an unknown, because I haven't been through that. You're on a waiting list for a transplant. You get the call. And I hear about people talking about that, and that's something of sort of my transplant journey that I never got, and I, don't wish it upon myself, and I hope that I'll never have to go through that again. But if it does, it happens, and I've got a complete faith in that, something good will come out of it. And if not, then I've had a really excellent, fantastic life that I'm very happy living now and doing all the things that I want to be doing. So I don't think there's anything more you can ask for.
I think that's a good outlook to have as well. So positive on it, and I've got to a point now where I've realised if anything goes wrong, or if there is anything going wrong, the doctors will pick that up, and there's things that they can do.
Yeah, I mean, how excellent are our NHS? Like, I just take for granted. Someone comes to me and they said, like, "Oh, I'm feeling a bit poorly. I'm feeling a bit run down." And my instant question is like, "Oh, well, what do your blood say?" Like, I just take it for granted that I, get my blood test all done. And they're like, "Oh, I haven't ever had a blood test. I don't know what that is." I was like, "Oh, well, maybe you should look into it," because they might be able to pick up something. And with the consultants, and I've got different sort of gastro consultants and liver consultants, and they just take excellent care. And if anything's sort of picked up, I've got trust that they'll look after me. And how brilliant a system have we got that can do that?
Absolutely, yeah. Back onto the World Transplant Games, you are the GB Athletics captain. What's the process of being selected for that, and what does your role involve?
So after Argentina, I was approached by Barry, who was doing some team managing at that time, and he just sort of said, "Look, we'd really like you to be kind of involved. Would you be women's captain for us?" I said, "Yes, it'd be a massive honour." And so we look for Malaga. It was myself and James Corbeck. We look at basically the sort of the standards that are happening. If we need to set standards within athletics to be selected for the games. Off the top of my head, I don't think we had a set of standards, but so it's a little bit foggy now. It was a few years ago. But you just need to be sort of competitive and training regularly. It's not just a case of like, I fancy doing a bit of athletics at the World Transplants for Great Britain. You have to be sort of competing at the British Transplant Games or competing elsewhere, or training regularly. And then for Gateshead and Newcastle, Matt Cave came in, and it's a case of we look at the timetables. We had to put a selection process in for that because everyone wanted to be part of the team, and it was already so huge. So we had sort of standards that needed to be achieved, and they could be achieved anywhere, any sort of competitions, and they weren't massively tough standards, but it was just so that we had that kind of level where we were actually sponsored with our kit that year by British Athletics. So thank you to them. They gave us all our training kit, so t-shirts and hoodies and rucksacks and caps, and it just gave a little bit of a kind of nod to them to say we're doing this right, and we're going through a selection process, and you compete for Britain, and it means a big thing. So yeah, on the day, just being there when I can, in between literally running to different events, making sure everyone's okay, making sure that we work with the team managers and who's going to be in those relay teams and getting relay declarations in. So quite sort of similar to so I've worked in athletics for the last sort of 15 years in various kind of roles with Welsh Athletics, British Athletics, and now back at Loughborough University. So similar sort of work with that.
And as captain, you'll be someone that people can look up to as a role model as well, with everything you've done before your transplant, the experience, the journey you've been through with the transplant, and everything you've gone to achieve in transplant sport since then. We mentioned setting world records before, and again, correct me if I'm wrong, you are the current world record holder for 100 metres, 200 metres, 400 metres, long jump, high jump. Is relay in there as well?
No, which annoys me. But that's nothing. I can't control that. So yeah. So those events. So going into Gateshead, I knew that the 400 was the one that had eluded me so far. And when I first started, I was in Argentina. I was sitting on a bus, and I was sitting next to Barry, and he said, "One day you're going to want to do the 400." And I said, "No way, Barry. There is no way I'm doing a 400. I am an out and out short sprinter. 60 meters is my speciality. There's no way." And then as Gateshead was coming around, I was like, I'm going to have to do it, aren't I? So I'd set myself that task of doing the 400, so that I had, the 1, 2, 4 high jump, long jump, that I had those. And I was actually really, really ill. I haven't mentioned this to many people in the run up. So I'd mentioned before that I've been traveling all around the world for work in the run up to in 2019. And I think I was just completely exhausted. So I got to Gateshead and I was so ill. I was in bed for the 4 days before the athletics competitions. And I basically my husband was bringing me food. I was sleeping, I was ill. And I woke up on the day of those competition and I thought, right, I'm women's team captain. I've got to do this. So got myself ready. And it was a bit of a trying to do the least I could to get to that 400, because I knew it would be just the worst. So doing the high jump and the 100 and doing sort of the least I could do, but still try and win it. So it was definitely still hard. And I remember standing on the start line for the 400 thinking, right, I'm not going to go for the world record anymore. I'm just going to go and try and win it. And then the woman on the outside of me from Iran absolutely just took out the first 200. I thought, what is this? What is happening here? Took out the first 200. And then I thought, right, well, I'm just going to go. I got to 300 meters, and one of our fellow athletes, Steve Jarvis, was just there, just going, just don't stop, just don't stop. And that last 100 was so horrible. I looked over at the time, saw that I got the world record, and collapsed. Was probably on the track for about 20 minutes. It took them, the sort of officials could sort of see me like asking me twice if I needed a paramedic or an ambulance, and just gently rolling me off the track so they couldn't hold the timetable up anymore. And my husband Gareth coming over, is there anything I could do? And me just sort of screaming at him. I was in so much pain. And I mean, it was ridiculous. I do look back on it and think I'd put myself through a lot. And in the build up, I was really, really ill. And I went on to do those events, and I had to, it's still a massive regret of mine that I had to pull out the next day of the long jump, which I look at the results and I probably would have won that. And I wasn't able to help the women's 4x4, who did go on to win world record without me. So they clearly don't need me. So now I'm kind of weighing up for next time whether I attempt all 7 again and try and get 7 and try and see if we can get the world record in all of them, because actually we're only a 10th off it in the 4x1 for this year, and I thought we were further away, but we're only a 10th off it in the 4x1, and whether they'd let me in basically in the 4x4 to see if we could re-break that, and that would be a nice thing before I sort of move into the next age category to hold all the world records in 7 events. But the other half of me is just give yourself a break, just go there and do the 100 meters and enjoy it, but we'll see which one sort of which wins yet.
And there's another record that you've got as well. This seems like a record episode. You became the first transplant athlete to compete at the British Athletics Championships in 2016. Do you know if anyone's done it since, or is it still just you?
I think it's still just me. So that was a big kind of driver after the first World Transplant Games in 2015. I then went back into training and wanted to qualify for the British Championships of non-transplant. And it's something that I almost took for granted previously. So I started attending those when I was 16. So in total, I've probably done between 15 and 20 indoor and outdoor British Championships, but it's just sort of unheard of for a transplantee to go and do it. So you have to get a set qualifying time to be invited. So that was my big goal after that. I like to have goals. I like to have aims. And yeah, so to get that time, I think it was about 7.8 seconds off the top of my head. And I think I ran 7.77. So just got under it. And to go there and people asked me about this. I hate to say it was a little bit anticlimactic, but only because I'd achieved it. I'd done the time. I'd been invited. That was me achieving the goal. So going there and doing it, I knew that I couldn't be as competitive as I used to be. So it almost made me a little bit sad that I knew that I couldn't go there and be really aiming to reach the finals, which I'd done a few times before. And to see so many people that were so super intense and driven, and I was just sort of there having a great time, going, "Oh, I'm just here, and it's brilliant, and I've achieved my goal." And I actually got through to the semi-final, so that's top 16 in the UK. So I was dead chuffed with that and making it as far as I could. But after that, it was kind of like, well, I don't know if that would be one of my goals anymore, because I had sort of, it was a bit of a tick box, and I'd done that and I achieved it, and it was great at the time to do it. And I'm in kind of a bit of a mixture in my headspace sometimes, that I want to shout from the rafters, I've had a transplant, look what donation can do and transplantation can do, versus just sort of getting on with things and, just letting people find out if and when they can. So it's trying to get a sort of good combination of those two.
Your achievements since your transplant are insane. We could shout it if you want on here. You've had a transplant and you've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 world records, and the first transplanted athlete to compete at the British Athletics Championships. I think I know what the answer to this next question might be, but what are your goals for the future?
So yeah, I still have to decide what I'm going to do in Perth, because that's a big decision. Every time, I mean, that last 400 that I did, I said never, ever, ever again. But I mean, it's been almost 2 years since then, so let's wait and see what happens in Australia. But also just mainstream athletics. So I'm over 35 now, and that's when Masters Athletics kicks in. It'd be really nice to medal at national championships for Masters. So that would be top 3 sort of over 35s in the UK, regardless of transplant, just mainstream athletics. But athletics is really tough to train for, and you're constantly trying to be better than you were the year before. And to do that, you have to either train harder or train longer or more to achieve that. And I've got other priorities in my life right now. I say I'm enjoying work. Work has been a bit of a nightmare with COVID for the last sort of 18 months, but I know that I will be enjoying work, as soon as COVID finishes. And I want to look after my health. I don't want to be sort of laying everything out there on the track, like week in, week out. It's really time consuming to be doing all that sort of training. But I know that I'm the sort of person that needs goals, and I'm kind of itching to make myself a goal. So watch this space.
Well, myself, and I'm sure everyone listening to this, hopes you go on and achieve those goals. And it brings us nicely to the listener questions. So every podcast, the day before, I put out a post on Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter, asking if anyone's got any questions for the guest who's coming on. So if anyone wants to do that in the future, if you follow Transplants Take on Sport on all the social media pages, Instagram and Facebook are at Transplants Take on Sport Pod, and Twitter is at TTOS Pod. You can get in touch with your questions either through the little question box on Instagram, comment, DM, however you want to do it, for a chance to feature on the podcast. This week, we've got the listener questions coming in from Matt. I've got the message up here. He says, what do you consider your greatest athletics achievement, both pre and post-transplant? Don't let her be modest. She was a superb athlete pre-transplant and is now the fastest female transplant sprinter in the world.
Oh, Matt, make me emotional. I guess I struggle to see myself as like a really top class athlete because I work with Olympians and Paralympians, so I'm surrounded all day by elite sports people. But I think going back pre-transplant, it was probably my national under-23 medal, and it happened to coincide with when I ran my PB, which I never broke. And that was just a really special moment to get across the line. It was my first kind of national medal, and to hear the time being announced just after I did it was that moment I will stays in my heart for a long time, and that's probably about 15 years ago now. Post transplant, it's really nice to sort of win medals, definitely. But I think this is a bit of a random one, but probably winning the high jump in 2019 at Gateshead. So I've already mentioned that I was really sick. I was, really poorly in the lead up to those, and just it probably helped. I'd lost some weight, so I was shoveling down prednisolone at the same time not eating. So I had this huge pred face and this skinny little body. But I won the high jump there, and it was the first, and I hadn't done particularly a lot of preparation for it. So I'd done a few kind of practice sessions in the weeks leading up. But when I got there, I was like, oh my goodness, there's 8 of us and 8 competitors. And, I'm definitely not the tallest of these high jumpers. I'd been researching. I knew there was a woman there that had been a high jumper before. She was Canadian. I was like, right, okay, she's probably going to take my world record. She's probably going to win it. And somewhere out of the bag, I equaled my PB on the first attempt of doing it, which made me win the gold medal, and my fellow competitor equaled it on the second attempt. So on count back, I won the medal, and that was just completely unexpected, and the first time I'd say that I was really under like a massive pressure, and I came out the other end and still won it. So I'd say, yeah, that one is probably like a really special one for me.
I think a high jump's a really good point, because the greatest achievement is not, I know a few people have said this, is not always the gold medal.
Yeah,
It's like often the first one, even if that's a bronze one, that's quite often the one.
yeah.
So I'm glad you said that.
Yeah, and it's not. I mean, it's difficult to say this, that I could do the 100 and maybe not always go absolutely flat out, and I still might be able to win it, which is just a really, really privileged position that I'm in, because that is my background and that's what I do when I'm a sprinter. That's what I train for. But to do something that was a little bit unexpected and just meant a lot to me, and doing that high jump and just coming away with it and being excited. But again, I have to figure out whether I'm going to do it, because it comes before any of the track events on the timetabling for World Transplant Games. So let's see if I do it again.
The next question from Matt, one for the sprinters. What are your top tips for a powerful, fast start, the first 20 metres?
Get strong. So get really strong. So Olympic lifting, so squats or power cleans or anything that you can do that just build up the muscles in your leg. There's nothing else really that you can do apart from have good reactions, which is probably genetic. I've been a little bit blessed with having really good reactions out the blocks, and so lots of practice, because it's not a natural thing to get from a crouch position to an upright position. So lots of practice coming out the blocks and getting really strong in the legs is my top tips.
And his final question is, when are you next running a 400?
Oh, God. Oh, I mean, I was actually asked on Wednesday, so I was there for the 200, and they asked me if I could do a 4x4, and I said no. I mean, I've stepped foot on the track about 5 times in the last 2 years, and the last 400 was almost catastrophic. So not for a while. I think potentially in Australia, if I'm going to go for those 7 world records, those 7 goals, then that would potentially be my next 400, if at all.
We'll soon see. Emma, it's been a pleasure to talk to you today, and the story is so inspiring with everything you've been through, how quick it was, all the complications afterwards, and the things you've gone on to achieve since then are, I think we've both said, ridiculous. Final question before we go, which is, as I say every week, one I ask everyone. What's one piece of advice you'd give to someone facing a transplant? Which I appreciate is possibly difficult, considering that you didn't really know you were facing a transplant.
No, so I mean, I can't necessarily be in a position where I tell people if they're facing it, but I can tell people as soon as they have been transplanted, as soon as they are fit and well enough to do so, get involved in transplant sport because it is an amazing organization, an amazing community. It's a family. It's my extended family now across the world, across the country. I would be lost without it. You can go there and you can do darts or snooker and bowls, or you can go and do a 5K or go and do stupid challenges like I do where you try and pick up a load of gold medals, but just do something and you will never regret it.
There we go. Thank you very much for listening. Thanks to Emma. If you're listening to this and you're enjoying it, please do spread the word. Let your family and friends know. Let people who aren't your family and friends know. Just go and shout it in the street. Why not? I would really appreciate the support and as many people listening as possible. And if you are listening on Apple Podcasts, which is the most used app to listen to the podcast on, it'd mean a huge amount to me if you could go and rate it 5 stars on the show page on there. And if you really want to as well, along with the 5 stars, if you leave a review, I'll read out any 5-star reviews at the end of the podcast in this little section here. We've already mentioned the social media, but go and follow them. Everything will be in the show notes, which wherever you're listening now will either be above or below, or depending on which app you're listening on. So if you have a look in there, drop a follow. By the time this goes out, there's currently a Euro 2020 fantasy football competition running, which if you want to still enter, you might be at a slight disadvantage because the tournament will have already started. But if you finish above me and you follow all the steps that are on the social media, you'll be entered into a draw for a chance to win a £20 voucher of your choice. And if you'd like to go on the podcast, I know some people have done this before, you can get in touch on social media. I'll try and read every message. And if you've got a story to tell, you can email as well, transplantstakeonsport@gmail.com. Let me know your story, and I can try and get you on. Once again, thank you very much for listening. Thanks to my guest today, Emma Wiltshire, and I'm going to get my Jeremy Clarkson voice on here, the fastest female transplant sprinter in the world. I've been Lewis Daniels, and you've been listening to Transplant's Take on Sport.